Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I am your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Alyssa Hertel, recruiting reporter from the Des Moines Register on this special edition of HawkCast, talking a little bit about some of the top uncommitted recruits in the state of Iowa for football this year. Of course, if you're a premium subscriber, you already got some intel on this. 10 or 11 players I'm watching this fall as far as guys that could be Hawkeyes, guys that are just some of the top prospects the state has to offer between the 26 and 27 classes. And Alyssa is going to join us today here on HawkCast. We're going to talk about some of the uncommitted players that we are watching this fall in the state of Iowa. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe, that like, drop a comment, let us know who are we missing from our list as well. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, hit that subscribe button, drop a rate and review. It helps us out a lot. So Alyssa joining us for the second year in a row for this podcast. Last year's did really well, so we're excited about this one. Alyssa, I'll let you start. Who's an uncommitted player between the 26 and 27 classes that you're really keeping an eye on this fall that might be a Hawkeye that might not too?
I think the one that comes to mind for me first, we'll go 2027. We'll start really young, has to be Luke Brewer at Norwalk. I mean, if you've seen him at camp, if you've seen him walking around, you know he is built to play football. He's got the size to be a tight end. He's got the blocking abilities, and I know that he's worked on that part of his game a lot this summer. And then, he's a receiver too. I mean, he can catch the ball like some tight ends I have not seen at the high school level. He kind of came out of nowhere. I think that's because Norwalk has some pretty sneaky talent on their roster right now. And so I'm kind of excited to see the difference between freshman year Luke and sophomore year Luke. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing is how much he has grown in a matter of months is what I think has caught some college coaches' eyes.
Last I talked to him, he's 6'5", 220. And you could tell physically there's a difference between year one and year two for him in high
Mhm.
school ball. Just picked up an offer from Georgia this summer after an invite-only camp appearance. He's got that one. He's got Tennessee. He's got Miami. Iowa State, obviously, the first program to offer. Kansas State in there. And he camped at Iowa and then picked up an offer. Like, this is he actually grew up an Iowa fan too. He told me that, so a little bit of Hawkeye edge there, but in an Iowa State family too, being in Norwalk. But 26 catches, 313 yards, and a touchdown in his freshman year. Adam Jacoby went out there and watched him this last fall for us and was like, "Yeah, this kid's going to be a national recruit," and here he is, a national recruit. We saw him at Iowa State's camp. I didn't get to watch him at all last fall, but we saw him at Iowa State's camp. And there's a reason the staff was all like, you know, those kids that show up to have an offer and the staff is just on them the whole camp. And
Hmm.
one of them. And like, Luke is a gem in the state of Iowa. Like, physically, in terms of his play, he's coachable. He's a nice kid. Like, and I'd probably say that about a lot of the guys that we're going to talk about here. But man, Luke would be a home run of a get for anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a great start because you can't teach that physical build, right?
Yeah.
5'2", 220, and man, he's grown a lot, but he's maintained that athleticism too. And that
Hmm.
first year of play at the high school level at Norwalk is going to be, I'm sure, super valuable. Of course, he's got Eli. You mentioned the talent there. Is it Eli Robbins? Is the 26 receiver?
Yeah. That's one of those sneaky talents that I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. And that'll open things up for him too. And assuming
Yeah.
they've got decent quarterback play. I don't know what's going on at quarterback for Norwalk, but that'll open things up for Luke in the middle, running routes over the middle. And yeah, I expect him to really blow up this year. Um,
Yeah.
that was
And, one
start.
thing that stuck out, you mentioned he's coachable. I think, in this recruiting world, coaches are looking so much for talent, but also for a culture fit, especially thinking Iowa State offered him. One of the things that stuck out about him was I asked him what it was like that, Matt Campbell was working one-on-one with him as much as he could at that camp. And this kid, with offers from Georgia and everywhere else across the nation, it seems, told me he went to his team camp the next day and took everything he learned with his tight end group and was just walking the rest of the players through what he was told by Iowa State's coaching staff. And that for me sticks out because that is something that college coaches want on their roster. They want a kid who, if he's not going to start, is going to sit there and still be an improvement for the team.
Gonna be a sponge
So,
and share
yeah,
some, like not only coachability but the ability to coach his teammates, right? Like
exactly.
that's pretty unique for a soon to be sophomore. He's a guy
Exactly.
that I went through going through schedules and planning out this fall. He's a guy that I definitely prioritized and like, oh, I got to see Luke Brewer at least once. Of course, they
Yeah.
don't come east at all, but I'm gonna have to go to the Des Moines area during a bye week or something and check him out. Maybe even the first week of the season. We'll see on.
Yeah.
But let's stay in 2027. It's a name that I think everybody wants to hear, and that's Jacks DeJean from OABCIG, the old stomping grounds for myself and of course his older brother Cooper. My plans are to head out there during that first bye week of the season and stay at home, get to see the family a little bit, but go out to the high school where I didn't play football, but I ran a lot of track up there. And watch Jacks and connect with some old teachers. And actually, I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast. I'm sure I have, and I'm sure I've told you too. But Jacks's and Cooper's dad, Jason, was my middle school football, basketball, and track coach. So I'll get to talk to him a little bit about how things are going recruiting wise. But Jacks you've been able to see him. I haven't seen him like play live. I know you saw him in 7-on-7, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to see him yet, but I have seen him in person, just do like a little basketball workout himself, get some shots up. And he is a physical specimen that Cooper wasn't, especially at this point in his career, 6'4", 210 right now, gonna be a sophomore. Like again, that's physical size you can't teach. And he has that athleticism like Cooper. He's physically
Mhm.
get like having two parents who were college athletes. They definitely have those genetic gifts. I'll say that. All-State as a defensive back in his freshman year, going to play wide receiver and DB this year. He is being recruited as a tight end. And Kansas State, UAB, and Iowa are his offers right now. Wouldn't shock me if that list continues to grow a little bit, but he's a guy that I ultimately do see ending up at Iowa just because of how things went with Coop. And of course, premium subscribers know more about that and my thoughts there. But tell me what you thought after seeing Jax live the first time.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned the offers. I wanted to note on that first. I think he's one of those players that might not get as many of the flashy offers. And I don't think people should take too much stock into that because Iowa really wants him. And after watching him play, it's easy to see why. I think 7-on-7 can be a tough evaluation process, at least the first time seeing a player play. Jax made it very easy. Basically, everything he did was a step above the people he was playing against. And not only that, he just made the people around him look better. He can catch the ball with ease. He makes difficult catches look simple. On the defensive side, I mean, there's not tackling in 7-on-7, but he read opponents' plays so well. He knew exactly where that ball was going. I'm sure before some of those receivers did. Um, he's just got such an advanced football IQ for being a rising sophomore. And I'm sure some of that comes with Cooper being his brother or watching, the middle brother Beckett as well, and having the parents in athletics. So I'm sure that some of that comes with just being the youngest out of the three. But it's one of those things that you can tell he has natural talent that he puts a lot of work into getting better at the same time. Athleticism is the biggest thing for him. Like you said, he's fast, he can jump, and for his height and weight, he is probably going to be the toughest matchup for someone else to go up against in the state of Iowa, I would say. He's he's one of those players that you watch and it's like, oh yeah, he's successful in one of the smaller classes. If you put him on a 5A roster, he would make the exact same impact that he does for OABCIG. Simple as that.
You might see some gaudy numbers at the 1A level. That's probably the difference. Like
Yeah.
you could plug him in at a 5A school at tight end or pass rusher, which is probably where he'd play. But at OABCIG, they run a spread system. He's just one of those athletes at a school at 1A where you put him on the back end and you trust him to make a play, right? That's what
Yeah.
they did with Cooper. And he's going to play quarterback junior and senior year of high
Yeah.
school as well because it's the best athlete at the school. You just say, okay, you take it. It's Derek
Yeah.
Weisskopf playing quarterback for Williamsburg last year. It's Cooper
Mhm.
playing quarterback for the Falcons, however long ago that was. And that's only going to help him learn more about the game of football and who's supposed to do what, where, and when, and why. And right now, we still have him listed as an athlete on Rivals. Offers are at tight end, but I mean, at 6'4", 210, you could see him being a pass rusher too. And if he really has some of that bend in Iowa or another school sees him there, I would not be surprised if that's where the offers start to come there either. But the ball skills are definitely there, especially playing wide receiver previously for him to come in and play tight end. Um, who's your second one?
Do we want to stick in 2027 or do we want to go junior
Your call,
class?
your pick.
Okay. I'll stick in 2027 because again, a kid that I saw out at camp, I think that he could have a really, really good season is Tate Wallace from Iowa City, Regina. I think his size is there. There's a little bit more room to grow. Yeah, there's some players that I see above him in terms of like our recruiting rankings. But I see a lot of potential for growth with him. I think playing at a school like Regina is good for him. Just gives him a lot more room to do a lot more on offense and defense. But from what I've seen, he's a production machine. Doesn't quit on plays. He's a hard hitter. He's built pretty well. I'd have to look up what his height and weight is, but yeah, he's one that I think, could be interesting depending on how he develops. Just kind of trying to remember he's only going to be a sophomore, so he's got some time. But he's one that I'm really, really curious about just based on his freshman year stats.
I was like, oh, we're talking 2027. We're definitely going Landon Bloom here. Oh, okay. No, Tate Wallace. All right. But
No, I've got Landon Bloom up pretty high.
I was
He's
gonna say, yeah,
yeah,
Landon Bloom is definitely one in there for me. Of course, he's got Iowa and Iowa State offers and Kansas State too.
I think so, yeah.
So we can talk about him, or I can talk about him next for all that.
Yeah.
But Tate gonna be at Iowa City, Regina, which is interesting because his older brother Jack is at City West. But
I've
uh,
never seen that split.
yeah, it's interesting. But Jack is he's headed to Minnesota State next year, D2. So football is definitely big in the Wallace family. But Tate receiving some interest from Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas State, and Wisconsin. Did go on a Wisconsin visit last year. Probably going to be just with that height, I would imagine, like an outside linebacker.
Yeah.
We have him listed as an athlete. Does he play tight end for Regina too?
I'd have to check. I think that's what he plays on offense, but I
Right.
think that's more because of his, blocking abilities.
Sure. Okay. 6'2", 215 is what we have him listed at. As I haven't talked to him, and probably haven't gotten that updated in a little while, but I'd imagine he projects more to that outside linebacker spot, maybe a pass rusher, edge. He's got that length, and having an older brother as a quarterback, and you mentioned football IQ with Jacks, having an older brother as a quarterback probably doesn't hurt. And
Yeah.
Regina has been known previously to kind of pump out Division I football players. So even as being as small as they are, of course, not having a ton of success, at least not last year. But um, Tate Wallace might very well be the next one, and he might want to show up a big brother too.
Yeah. A little bit of competition.
Right. What did you see? I know we both saw him at Iowa State's camp. I didn't watch him super closely, but what did you
Yeah.
see that maybe translates well to projecting to the next level?
I think it's just his overall strength. There's a little bit of athleticism there. I wouldn't put him on the same level as some of the other guys we've talked about with that athleticism. But I think, for his build, he's got good speed, he's got good vision. The strength is there. So I think if he can kind of put that all together and just really work on taking it to the next level, I think that's the hardest part for him is he has it. It's just the people in his class that are, above him in the rankings have kind of already put all of that together and they're just steps ahead. I mean, it also helps that some of them are 6'4" plus. But they're in different positions, so that doesn't matter as much. I think he needs this year to take that leap though, or he's going to be playing catch up based on how this class is already looking.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hit on Landon Bloom just because I mentioned him quickly
Yeah.
here. I think I want to move to the 26 class before too long, but Bloom is a really interesting prospect in that he isn't physically built like Luke or like Jax or even
Mhm.
like Tate. He's really thin. He's
Yeah.
really thin, but you work with that because he's just going to be a sophomore. He's 6'4", 180. So
Yeah.
that'll tell you how thin he is. He was invited to this invite-only Georgia camp as well. He's definitely, at the very least, going to be a Midwest prospect because he's already
Mhm.
got those Iowa, Iowa State, and Kansas State offers. You see the athleticism, the production was nuts as a freshman in
Yeah.
eight-man football for Woodbine. He's another one of these Western Iowa kids. Let's see here, 50 catches, 839 yards, and 17 touchdowns. So, and they return their quarterback this coming year. So, he's going to be this 27 class, tight end, tight end, tight end. Right now he's a wide receiver, but being 6'4", 180, he's probably going to continue to grow and
Yeah.
fill out that frame. He could be a tight end. Now, okay, so that's 1.5 for me. Let's talk about a little bit the 26 class. Um, One guy I have to mention after going to Iowa City West last week, and I wrote more about him for our premium subscribers. If you want to check out what his recruitment's been like, hearing from Iowa, Minnesota, Kent State, Miami, of Ohio, and North Dakota State, is Juju Manson, son of
Yeah.
Jason Manson, who is the director of player development. I want to say, yeah, director of player development at Iowa. Been with the program for 3 years, former quarterback slash wide receiver with the Hawkeyes in like 2006 ish. And
Mhm.
Juju definitely got the genetics. Wow. He
Yeah.
was 6'3", 185 last year, and now he's 6'4", 207. He's
Yeah.
going from playing safety to edge slash linebacker and tight end. And I could see him playing any of the three at the next level with how fluid he is. He's not fluid enough to play wide receiver,
Mhm.
but you see it on almost every rep. And what I want to see, what Garrett Hartwig, their head coach, told me, is that you put the pads on, and he might be a soft-spoken kid, but he doesn't play like that on the football field.
Yeah.
He'll put his face in somebody, right? And
Yeah.
that is what I'm really, really excited to see this fall. I'm going to be at the battle for the boot between City High and Iowa City West. Of course, Iowa City West, we're talking uncommitted, right? So we didn't
Mhm.
mention Mason Woods, who's going to be there, super twitchy. He's going to be a tight end at Iowa, more or less guaranteed. Of course, everything's up in the air yet with him being recruited as an athlete, but tight end will be his best fit at Iowa. Juju Manson being recruited at Iowa by both Seth Wallace and Kelvin Bell, so he could play linebacker, he could play defensive end. They both want him. He could, but that's the thing too, is he could play tight end. Right now he's hearing from schools about edge and about linebacker, but I'm not kidding when I'm saying, like, I saw a couple reps where it's so smooth that it's like it's hard not to see the vision.
Yeah. No, I've only gotten to see him on film because we have an Iowa City reporter who gets the pleasure of seeing Iowa City West stacked roster night in and night out. But watching his film, I'm watching, the offense first, and I'm like, this kid is athletic as heck. He does all of the right things. And then it flips to his defensive highlights. And it's like night and day. You've got the athleticism on offense, and then you've got this just absolute menace on defense in the best way possible. And it's one of those that I had to do a double take because I was like, this is filmed from a sophomore season. That was the craziest part to me, is knowing that, especially with the players that are on Iowa City West roster, I feel like even with his connections to Iowa, Juju has kind of gone under the radar a little bit. And I think this season is really going to be when he puts Iowa high school football fans on blast. Um, at least if he keeps up what he did last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 31 and a half tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions and safety. Also, like, pair that with his speed. He is part of Iowa City West. They had some ridiculous relays this year at Drake and at State.
Yeah.
He returned 4 kicks for 118 yards and a touchdown. So that, and like he played a little bit of receiver last year too. Didn't have a ton of
Mhm.
stats there, but I'm this is the I wouldn't say make or break year. I don't think that's right because he just has the physical tools to get there no matter the production, like one of those type of
Mhm.
kids. But this could be a year where he does break out and we see more of him on that statewide scale, and people are like, oh gosh, Juju and Iowa City West are coming this week. We got to play them. So
Yeah.
that's a team that I might watch multiple times this year just for the sake of keeping an eye on Juju, keeping an eye on Mason in his final year of high school football, and then Colin Whitters, who very well could be.
Ah,
Oh, that spoiler.
you took
Sorry.
mine.
Go for it.
I was like, let's stay on this Iowa City West train because like I was saying, the stacked roster. Colin Whitters for me is like everything you want to see in an offensive line recruit, right? He's 6'4", he's 300 pounds, he's athletic 300 pounds. You look at the stats that Iowa City West had last season, nearly 2,000 passing yards, over 1,000, over 1,300, I think, something like that, rushing yards. Like their offensive line is good. They help that offense produce. And then on
But
defense,
but
oh,
he didn't really play offensive line last year.
that's where I was going.
Oh,
Defense,
okay.
yeah, defense.
Sorry, way ahead of you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but his defense is kind of where it shines, right? You look at a guy his size, and I think he had 20 some tackles this year. He has a fumble recovery. He's all over the field. Watching his film, I describe Juju as a menace. Colin Whitters is just a wrecking ball. I mean, he's one of those guys that you don't want to line up against because he's just overpowering. And against some of the teams he plays, he doesn't have to do much. I really like his size. I like his strength. I like the way he seems to approach the game. I think he's going to be really, really fun to watch this year.
So, in talking about the offensive line being so important for Whitters, and I mean not Whitters, but for West, but they're important for everybody. He's pretty raw because he hasn't played offensive
Yeah.
line. Um, and what you look at with him and what Iowa tends to look at in the recruitment process is they like guys who have played defensive line because they like that athleticism and how it translates to the offensive line. And that's what you're looking for with Colin. And there's a reason he's got an offer from Iowa State and from Iowa for offensive line. And he hasn't even played the position yet, right? Like it is that athleticism. It's the physical build at 6'4", 300 pounds. And the thing that I noticed in watching him at Iowa City West is he finishes reps, whether he's got pads on or not. He's he's the big offensive lineman that's loud and boisterous and just has fun. You can tell he loves football,
Mhm.
which I am imagining that most kids that go out for football at least like football. Colin loves football, and
Mhm.
I'll quote a mutual friend here in JC Moreau from Strength U in an article that I wrote about Colin after he got his offer. He's just a big kid. He came to our pass protection clinic last year and didn't light it up, but he just did everything well. He has played basketball for his whole life, and you can see that in his footwork, how he moves his hips. He moves fluidly, and he's a natural athlete. And pair that with that raw athletic ability, and he's gonna bury some dudes this year. like we talk about guys being maulers, and he has the potential to be that kind of offensive lineman. And he is a fixture in the Iowa City community. Is something that he and I talked about when I wrote about his offer, and of course I'll include that offer, or excuse me, that article in the description if you want to check that out, premium subscribers. So yeah, that's a solid third pick. Um, You know, I already did two from 27. I'll do another more or less for Landon Bloom, but I'll do another one. And I think this is a kid that is on the rise, but might be a little less known, especially for those listening in Eastern Iowa. But Kason Thomas out of Bishop
Yes.
Heelan, did not really watch him last year. Had I known that he was going to be this type of prospect, I would have watched that Williamsburg Bishop Heelan game a little bit closer, even though Williamsburg really handled Heelan in that state championship 3A game. But outside linebacker, offers from Iowa and Iowa State. Heelan, a Northwest Iowa football program that has continually dominated that part of the state, and generally they've won some state championships as well. And last year, 56 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. And you can see it in just his sophomore film. It's like, oh, that's an outside linebacker slash edge. 6'1",
Hmm.
190. He did grow up a Nebraska fan, which, ooh, oh no. So that's something to keep an eye on if the Huskers get involved.
Hmm.
They'll probably push for him pretty hard. But he's also heard a little bit from Michigan and Arizona, which is
Yeah.
kind of unique for an Iowa prospect. But he he looks bigger on film than what his stats show or his measurables show, and he plays that big. And like
Yeah.
you can see how things could maybe will translate to the next level for him. And he's a guy I'm going to make sure I go out for Northwest Iowa and see Jacks at one point this year, but I may see what I can do to go out and see Case and Thomas play as well. If not, in the playoffs, because Heelan's probably going to be back right there where they were last year. He plays running back for them as well, so both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
Again, I could definitely see him. He might fit better in a 3-4 where he can play more so that outside linebacker edge as opposed to being in Iowa where he'd probably play like a Will,
Hmm.
maybe even a defense. He's probably not tall enough to play defensive end, but he'd be more of a Will, maybe Leo type of position at that linebacker spot. But I like Kason Thomas a lot.
Yeah, that was a good pick.
Thank you. Um, now, let's talk a little bit more about last year in that 24 class there were a couple. Oh, by the way, well, never mind. Um, there were a couple late commits, signees, if you will, commits in that 24 class, but 25 not really going on this year in the state of Iowa. Of course, Nick Brooks no longer going to Kennedy, but I've just got a list of some guys that I think could be preferred walk-ons that would make an impact at a place like Iowa. I'll start with, and I know you do too, Alyssa. I'll start with Parker Southerland. He's a guy that I've
Hmm.
talked about a good amount, at least on the board. 6'7", I think. Um, he's got the attention of our regional recruiting analyst in Greg Smith. And 6'7", he's probably going to play tight end at the next level. He's already got preferred walk-ons from Northern Illinois and South Dakota State. Northern Illinois, a group of five school, and South Dakota State, perennial playoff contenders, if not national champions at the FCS level. So that's pretty indicative of who he could be. Iowa gets preferred walk-ons that have South Dakota State offers more often than not. And Parker, I think his recruitment has been a little off because he got mono last year in
Hmm.
camp time, so didn't really get the option to show off what he could do last summer.
Yeah.
Hasn't really put up a bunch of numbers in terms of productivity, but you can see how things would translate. Like that frame is something that schools can work with, and if he doesn't become a tight end, I mean, he said it himself, throw him at left tackle. Like just put on a ton of weight, put him at left tackle. And I think I'm just shocked like UNI hasn't offered or like South
Yeah.
Dakota hasn't offered or somebody. He went on a visit to Illinois, been on a bunch of visits to Iowa. The staff likes him a lot. And he will be a preferred walk-on target for the Hawkeyes for sure.
Mhm.
Bunch of D2 offers. I'm really shocked that the FCS programs in the Midwest haven't hopped on Southerland.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think, I've only seen a little bit of his film. We have him pretty high in our top 50 for the in-state recruits. And it's just because it's kind of what you said, just like looking at the offers he has and the things he's missed when other kids go to those things to get those offers. I think he's really flying under the radar. And I think, we had some in the 2024 class. I think Aiden Flora was a steal as a walk-on for Iowa State. I think Southerland has the potential to be that, especially at Iowa, where they could really love if they get him as a preferred walk-on rather than scholarship. And I think that's kind of where things are leaning for him right now. Um, and I mean, if he can go and play college football and show what he's really worth, he'll do it. So I think, yeah.
FBS, he's preferred walk on, but he's a Division I football player. And
Mhm.
this is one of those scenarios where I'm confused and like almost irritated. Yeah, like why the hell does he not have an FCS offer or two
Yeah.
or three or four? And he's been on visits. He's shown interest in programs, but just kind of interesting to me. Like Spencer Brown, even who was brought into UNI as a scholarship tight end and was a twig, and what they do, they made him into an NFL right tackle for the Buffalo Bills. Like I don't know how you miss that vision with a guy like Parker Sutherland, but I
Yeah.
am not a college football coach. I'm just a recruiting reporter. So, any other 25 kids that you've got an eye on, Alyssa?
Yeah. I think mine's probably going to come a little bit Central Iowa bias just because I see them more. Sam Zelenovich at Southeast Polk
Mm.
is one for me. I think he has those Air Force and Army offers, and a few other, lower level ones. I think he has good potential to be a preferred walk-on. He's a wide receiver at 6'2". I think, college coaches are a little bit nervous about his size. But when you watch him, he makes up for that in more ways than one. I think back to last season, Southeast Polk versus Dowling, triple overtime. He was calm, cool, collected, kept his team in the game, made huge catch after huge catch. And I mean, he had a Division I quarterback in Connor Moberly throwing to him, but he made Moberly look really good in a lot of plays. So I think he could be D1. I don't think that Iowa or Iowa State are comfortable offering him, especially with some of the wide receivers they already have in their classes. So I think if he wants a spot with one of those in-state teams, and maybe Iowa's a little bit nervous with the proximity to Iowa State, um, I think he's more a preferred walk-on for those in-state programs, size, what they've seen, what they have in their classes.
Zelenovich, yeah, you mentioned the Army, the Air Force, also North Dakota State, like UNI, South Dakota. So he's got some legit FCS offers. And if I'm Sam, like I know at Iowa State they were referring to him as Sammy, so they clearly know him at least fairly well. I would not be surprised if Iowa State offers him a preferred walk on. But if I'm him, and to reference UNI again, I look at what Sam Schnee did with the Panthers in however many years. He went from a walk-on running back to leading the team in receiving his last 2 years, being Theo Day's like main option. And that's something I consider, especially with their implementation of the air raid this coming season. One more
Yeah.
that I want to mention that I've seen and that I've really seen the potential with is Braden Jackson out of Centennial, son of Fred
Mhm.
Jackson, former Buffalo Bills NFL running back who went to Co. This is a kid that there are just there are athletes that you see the way they run and the fluidity. It's like, oh, that's different.
Mhm.
That's Braden Jackson to me. And I think he might have been overshadowed because of Elijah Porter, who is a
Yeah.
Northern Illinois commit, was previously committed to UNI and then got that Northern Illinois offer where his brother is
Mhm.
and committed there to the Huskies. But Jackson, it's it's one of those things where you get him the ball in space and he makes a play. He might be a little undersized. He's another kid that I think should have FCS offers, whether it's UNI. He's heard from South Dakota State, North Dakota State. Right now, it's just wait and see. With that bump in scholarship opportunities to 105 for FBS level or at least Power Four, I'm not really familiar with how all that stuff works. It's too many moving parts for me to pay attention to. But Maybe there's a scholarship out there for him somewhere at the Power Four level. I think Iowa would like him as a preferred walk-on. They don't have any running backs committed in this 25 class, as far as I know. They've pretty much backed off that, but they might go out and offer somebody else this fall. I don't think it will be Braden Jackson, but he would be a really good fit somewhere as a preferred walk-on. I really, really like what I saw from him last year, especially against Cedar Falls.
Yeah, I think, the tough thing for Braden Jacks, it's like you said, like I've seen so much potential there. Last year was kind of the first year that he was playing a full varsity season.
Oh,
You've got Elijah Porter as your starting running back. And then with Trenton Smith at quarterback and the host of receivers they had last year, Braden would go in every once in a while, or he'd be like a blocking back. And he was really good at that. He did his job, no complaints. But it's really tough when going into your senior season is like Centennial's offense this year seems built for him. And so it's tough when you finally have the offense you need to really shine in your senior year. So yeah, like you said, I think if there's one out there, like someone loses a running back recruit or a commitment, or someone's just holding off for that late star, there's someone that could pop up, but I think the in-state schools would be really comfortable getting him as a steal off scholarship for now.
oh, they'd be really happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too is he's not a kid that's going to pop at camp just because of his
Yeah.
lack of size. But when you put the pads on and let him make a play on the field, that's where it starts to translate. It's like, oh, I see it. So
Yeah.
he's a guy that I'll be keeping a peripheral eye on this fall. In the 25 class, maybe some preferred walk-ons coming his way. Again, Alyssa Hertel from the Des Moines Register joining us on this episode of HawkCast that we've scheduled out a little bit for my vacation purposes. So Alyssa, really appreciate you making some time and joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll wrap it up here. We appreciate you tuning into this episode. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can do that today. Iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. And if you're not subscribed on YouTube, do that right now as well. Drop a comment. Let us know who we should be watching this fall. Maybe we didn't list them. But again, I've got my top 10 uncommitted, 11 uncommitted players to watch on Iowa.rivals.com, Hawkeye Beacon. You can check that out there at Hawkeye Beacon. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Leave that rate and review. It helps us out a lot, and it does make us very happy. For now, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter. We will see you next time.